Oh, okay. And there's a method to this, and I
Mm,
can learn it, and I can practice it, and I can bring in like mindfulness techniques at the same time.
yeah.
Um, Learn to take control and say, I need to drive this conversation to an outcome, to a decision. Uh,
There we go. So yeah, Mary, I'd be really happy just to, yeah, get straight into your background. So again, thanks for coming onto the podcast as well. I didn't want to miss out the thanks, but thanks for coming on. Yeah, I'd be really happy to hear how you ended up where you are at Cisco. I know it's a long story probably, but yeah, we can get into it.
yeah, thanks, Dale. And thank you for having me on the podcast. Um, I always debate about whether I should work from the end and go backwards or work from the beginning and go forwards.
It's like when you're
Um,
putting together a research presentation, like, do I start back to front or too long? Did it read?
yeah,
But yeah, go ahead.
yeah. I have, I don't think anyone has a typical story with how they got into UX. I know people come from design, people come from journalism, anthropology, academia.
Mm.
I'm certainly not an academic. I have I have a bachelor's degree, and it is in cognitive neuroscience from
Oh.
MIT, but I didn't go to any grad school. I was pre-med, um, but I did not go to medical school, obviously. There was one class I did take, though, that sometimes I give it credit for opening me up to behavioral science and this type of research. It was
Mm.
a class called Lab in Higher Cognition.
Oh.
And it was a really, really cool class. We recreated a psychological experiment from the 1950s,
Mm.
which had a lot of different issues with the experimental design. So we recreated it the way they did it in the 50s, but then we also modernized it and
Mm.
uh, brought it up to current standards. We, instead of running it with like a projector, we ran it with a like with a laptop, and it was really interesting research. But it got me so, and I could share. I've actually shared this in some interviews in the past. I've recreated the experiment for my panel.
Mm.
Um, but what it was really interesting to me in this study was the outliers, and I started
Mm.
thinking, what's going on with those people? That's so interesting that some people just had these out there reactions.
Mm.
So of course I've always been since definitely since college been really curious about our brains, how our brains work and how
Yeah.
people work, how we socialize, all of those types of things.
Mm.
So I went way back there. But then, I was in California. I was um out of school, couldn't really find a great job. I was working in a mouse research lab at UCLA.
Mm.
And then something took me up, some family, I'll say, reasons took me up to San Francisco. And I was very lucky to be there in the tech scene there and trying to get in. I was doing data science
Okay.
interviews, actually. So I thought, okay, data science, I have like I have an analytical background. This will make sense. Um, but I was like a deer in headlights when it came to whiteboard coding.
Okay.
It made me anxious and I couldn't really answer very well. But my friend who's a data scientist said, have you heard of user research? And I said, no. And, but that's kind of it. From there, I learned what it was and I thought, this is great. And that really fits me because
Mm.
I love talking to people. I love learning about people, studying people, and I'm very social. I love meeting new people, like meeting you.
Yeah.
Uh, but I also am hyper analytical, and
Mm.
I always am thinking a lot about what does this mean and what's the bigger picture and what does this connect to? Um,
Mm.
and honestly, it's funny like getting on this meeting, getting set up, trying to work with my phone. I'm not the best with tech. I'll be the first person to mess up. I make a good tester because I'll walk into a new feature and be like, I don't know what to do here.
Mm.
Um, so seeing all that frustration with technology too got me motivated to say, yeah, how can we make tools better? Especially back then in like 2013,
Mm.
and now still too, but you'll see so many apps or websites that are just so hard to use.
Yeah.
And I stick with this. I want technology to help us and to make our lives better,
Mm.
not to annoy us.
Yeah.
Um, so anyways, I applied to a lot of jobs to finally get my first job with user testing and entry level job with them.
Hmm.
Um, but it was like getting thrown in the deep end of UX because we had 5 projects at once with a 1 week deadline. It was a
Wow.
very, very intense sort of environment there. From there, I went to a tiny startup in Palo Alto. Really great experience. Only 15 people when I joined the company, so very tiny. Not many
Wow.
researchers, I think, are at a company that small unless they started their own company,
Yeah.
maybe. Um,
That's
and
true.
then yeah, so from there, I took a jump to GE Healthcare for over 4 years.
Mm.
I wasn't sure I was going to like it because it was my first time at a big corporate company. I was really worried about that, but I did like it.
Mm.
And that was more human factors work. It was a
Okay.
medical, it was software that was classified as a medical device.
Hmm.
So there was more rigorous human factors validation testing, formative and summative testing. But over the 4 years, and it did take that long, we worked our way back in the development process to try to say, let's not just test it at the end for
Mm.
legal reasons for the FDA. Let's test it earlier and earlier to see, like, are we even building the right thing here? Do they even want this feature?
Hmm.
Um, and even trying to predict earlier, is this feature going to make the tool safer too?
Yeah.
Or is this feature actually going to introduce more risk,
Mm.
more room for error? Um, so yeah, it was a great journey there. And it brought me where I am now in Pittsburgh. This is my hometown and where I live now. So I was
Nice.
grateful that that job brought me home.
Hmm.
And then from there, I went to a robotics startup still in Pittsburgh here, uh, making self-driving forklifts,
Oh
which
well,
is
that's
it's it it's weird, but it's real. It was you'd think, okay, this was like a hypothetical company. No, it was I think the company was 300 people when I was there, and we had many customers, and I could go into our customer sites, of course, with like a hard hat, hearing protection, eye protection, reflective vest, like all of that, steel toe boots. I could go and see at our customer sites these forklifts and these tow trucks. They're sort of tugger trucks.
Mm.
Um, these little trucks carrying around, manufacturing stuff, packages, mail, stuff like that. It was really cool. And I wanted to work in a
Mm.
physical space other than
Mm.
like I'd worked in software so much. I wanted to work in a physical product, physical space. Um, so I got that great chance. And then 2022, this is when like a lot of the layoffs started, and I got hit along with about a third of that company
Mm.
um, with a layoff. And from there, after some job searching, I landed at Cisco, which is where I am now.
Mm.
Been here about 2 years, and I have a lot of great things to say about Cisco if you want to hear more.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's another big corporate company
Mm.
and great culture here though. And there's a lot of great leadership in UX research.
Mm.
So I'm very lucky to be here, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how I landed at Cisco. That's probably the very long version of the story.
No, no, that's cool. It's nice to hear a detailed like journey path for your career. It's actually for me like almost full circle because I don't know if I told you this in our like pre-meetup before recording that I studied Cisco Discovery, like the networking certification, back when I was at high school. Don't know if I told you.
Oh, so you got your certification.
Yeah, I did this discovery. Yeah, I completed the first. I think it's like the first 4 modules, like 1 to 4, and then from there, if you want to specialize, you can go to university and study deeper. So for me, it's kind of
Yeah.
like full circle to go from that and then interview on my podcast, the senior researcher
Yeah.
at Cisco. So
Yeah, that's cool. No, you didn't tell me about that. That's
no, I didn't.
cool.
There you go. So now everyone has heard it now on the podcast. But yeah, thanks again for going through that. I was just curious to know what challenges did you face? Because obviously you've always been around research into like analytical thinking, and your roles have always entailed that sort of way to work. But what was it? No, sorry, I'll backtrack that and maybe edit that part out. Uh, no, I'd just be interested to know what challenges did you face maybe moving over into user research as compared to your previous roles that maybe involved research or analytical thinking, but were maybe focusing more on human interaction, human behavior, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are some principles and logical things that I brought from my education,
Mm.
just in terms of basic experimental design and logic of, well, if I tell them this, they're already going to know that. They'll give away the secret. So some of this logic, like I brought to it, but otherwise I was kind of starting from scratch with just trying to learn everything about UX. I mean, they gave
Mm.
us at user testing, I think they gave us Don't Make Me Think and oh, what's the other one about rocket science? Rocket surgery. I don't know. It's another one of those same category.
Uh,
So they gave us these books that were really like basics of UX. And I picked up books along the way, the books that people
mm.
recommended and figured out. Um, yeah, I mean, I would say one thing. So starting at user testing, I would say there's two things. There's a um and they're both sort of softer skills, actually, that I learned earlier on or had to practice a little earlier on. Um, User testing the platform, 10 years ago, 10 plus years ago, was for uh, unmoderated, task-based, think aloud usability testing. It was very specific in that method. Um,
Mhm.
and I got really good really quickly at running those kinds of tests, unmoderated specifically.
Okay.
Uh, and we also would here and there do moderated tests where they were actually intercept tests most of the time where I'm not sure why they had this offering. It was interesting. You'd go to a user, someone would go to a website and a pop-up would say, hey, do you have 15 minutes right now to
Uh,
participate in a test?
mm.
And then we would be like on call to jump on these calls
Oh
as the
wow,
moderator. It was interesting.
that's innovative.
And yeah, well, I think that they don't think they do this anymore because
No,
there's
no,
probably a
I've
reason
never
they don't do it
experienced
like
that.
this anymore. But it was interesting. And we had an ops person there and we're still good friends, he and I. But so he would help coordinate the call and get the call connected and everything. And he said, Mary, you're not good at moderated tests.
Thank you very
Um,
much.
yeah, yeah. And I was like, yep, love you too. Um, but it's true, like I had to learn the moderator pace and
Okay.
patience and really like leaving space for someone else to talk
Mm.
and instead of like finishing their sentences because that's like the kind of person I was and still am sometimes in life, but never in an interview.
Yeah.
I actually pride myself in being really, really good at getting people to share, opening up,
Mm.
really leaving space. I actually think this is one of my biggest strengths now.
Mm.
And sometimes I think that's how it works is like the thing that although this is against that like strengths finder model where they
Mm.
tell you
Okay.
like find your strength and like lean into that. But I kind of think something that comes uh something that comes to you naturally, you're not necessarily that great at it sometimes. And when you
Yeah.
have to like and you take it for granted sort of so you don't focus on it, you don't improve it.
Yeah.
Um, but then something that doesn't come naturally, you like take a look and you dissect it and you say, oh, okay, and there's a method to this, and I
Mm.
can learn it, and I can practice it, and I can bring in like mindfulness techniques at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, so that skill, just with running moderated and research and
Mm.
running interviews, was something I had to learn. And that same type of patience and really like mindfulness and sort of centering, I guess, that you can
Mm.
do dealing with stakeholders too.
Mm.
Because I'm sure you've worked with people or seen people who kind of they'll lose it in a conversation. Maybe
Yeah.
not with a participant, but maybe with a stakeholder. They'll
Mm.
just get frustrated and
Yeah.
kind of get a little bit out of hand with it and um be able to keep that calm and that
Mm.
patience with your stakeholders too, I think is a big
Oh
skill.
yeah. Yeah.
The other thing I had to learn, maybe not the softest skill, but really like ownership, project management,
Mm.
uh,
Okay.
and when it comes like I'll never forget I at GE Healthcare early on a project that I was running, a test that I was running, kind of like the schedule got thrown off and we had to reschedule 15 doctors and they were so mad about this.
Oops.
And then they like brought me into a room with, my boss's boss and a couple other people. And I remember I was wearing my yellow rain boots. I was like, I was not dressed nicely. I was like wearing my yellow rain boots. And they were like, "So whose responsibility is this?" And I was like, "Oh, it's
Ooh.
mine. I need to project manage these things and I need to like look at how long something's going to take and do we
Mm.
have program managers, right? Like
Mm.
their job sometimes is to like put people on the hook and
Mm.
say, this is due at this time. Are you on track for this?
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing I had to set up where it was like, if I don't have the testing environment with the anonymized data, if I don't have that in
Mm.
hand by this day, we're going to have to push back the whole schedule. And I had to become like a project sort of program
Mm.
manager in that way.
It's been more the
Um,
ops side of things.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And I also bring that into running meetings too. I'm very and I remember having to do this at GE to get the answers I needed out of some engineers, probably about the test environment. We dealt a lot with these test environments. Um, Really, instead of just spending half hour meeting after half hour meeting after half hour meeting, talking around what are we going to do here, I had to really start to learn to take control and say, I need to drive this conversation to an outcome,
Mm.
to a decision. Uh, or else we're just going to keep going in circles and it'll get so frustrating. So I sort of stepped
Mm.
up in that way too at that time. So yeah, those were a couple things that
Mm.
I had to learn, not really about user research exactly, but just about getting it, how to get it done and do do
Mm.
do it well.
Yeah, no, no, those are actually really good points, and I think as a researcher, especially if you're new, there are things that you should look at. I also like your point as well around rather than leaning into your strengths, look at your weaknesses. I think that's a really good point you made about if something comes naturally to you, probably I am the same. You don't really focus on it because you say, "Oh, I'm good," and you get kind of lazy at your strength because you don't need to work on it per se, but you just go with your strength. And that's good. Obviously, there are things that we're all good at, but it's good then to look at your weaknesses because then with your weaknesses, you put a lot of effort into them to bring them up to a level that you need to use them at work or wherever. And maybe eventually actually become your strengths, which you would say in your case. I forgot what you mentioned before. I can cut this part out, which
Oh
was
no, like being a patient
there we go. Yeah.
conversationalist.
Hey, there
Yeah.
we go. Probably my memory is my weakness.
It's okay.
No, no, yeah. Being the conversation is in the end, like you say, has become your strength. So I think that's good if you're early on in your career that don't shy away from your weaknesses or think, oh, I need to hide them or I need to really push my strengths. Do that, but also look at your weaknesses and eventually that might actually become something that's your strength because you have put so much effort in it and it's something you've
Mhm.
focused on. So I really like that point.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Also, I wanted to just go around that part around communication, because it is something that when I was new in research or when I was came across user research, UX research, I didn't realize that communication with stakeholders and other various components of a business or a team would be so important, like communication with them, how you present insights and findings, how you communicate the whole project with them, and as you mentioned now, like the project management side of things. If you are new to research and this side of things, or what are some things that you would advise, or even what are some things that helped you to improve on that side of things, on your communication, maybe dealing with stakeholders?
Mm.
Because that was something that I found out on the job, like this whole having to go to stakeholders, stakeholder management, also mapping stakeholders and their investment or non-investment, etc. And I learned on the job and made many mistakes. So if I'd have known before, I would have focused a lot more on that. So what advice do you have, or what tips helped you?
Yeah, it's such a huge part of the job, you know?
Mm.
It's such a huge part of the job is figuring out how to, because you can do your research, but then if no one wants to do anything about it
Hmm.
for whatever reason, then what's the point? Why did we do the research at all?
Yeah.
You want impact, right?
Yeah.
You want to be able to put that on your portfolio. You want to be able to make a difference in the users' lives, you know?
Mm.
Um, so there's a couple of things, and different teams take different approaches to this. Uh, but I've seen the need to bring the stakeholders into the process early enough
Okay.
where you talk to them about your plan
Mm.
before you go off and do it
Yeah.
and sort of address any concerns about the approach. Uh, because if they come back and the classic example of well, you only talk to 5 people for this
Yeah.
usability test. And if you didn't, prepare them for that ahead of time,
Mm.
one that I really commonly run into though is, oh, you talked to the wrong people
Mm.
and you didn't cover this segment over here, or that person is too new to the job, those
Mhm.
kinds of protests.
Mhm.
Um, so I like to really lay that out with my stakeholders ahead of time.
Yeah.
Exactly who should I be recruiting and what should the demographics be or what criteria do they need to meet?
Yeah.
Um, I think some people take the approach where you need to just build your trust with your stakeholders so that whatever you say is the insight.
Mm.
They say, great, let's go. Instead of saying, whoa, 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 well, what did you do? Who did you talk to? What exactly did you say? That kind of thing.
Mm.
So I think that's the idea, is to get to that place
Yeah.
where that you might send them a basic outline of what you're planning to do before you do it, but there isn't
Mm.
like a meeting and multiple reviews and discussion because they trust you.
Mm.
I think that's the end goal, but I've just been in a lot of situations where I've seen the benefit of bringing them in early.
Yeah.
Um, not just to not just to avoid those protests later on, but to also say, well, what is really the research question here? What are we really
Yeah.
trying to figure out?
Yeah.
Because if you just go off and start research and you didn't really know what
Mm.
what we were trying to figure out, what the deadline was for the decision, those kinds of things, all of those elements should change your choice of your method
Yeah.
and your approach, and what
Mm.
you might probably have to compromise on some
Mm.
things because of a timeline. Um, so those things, and then also just building those relationships and understanding how are
Mm.
they being measured and what's their goal,
Yeah. Yeah.
because product managers are measured differently from us.
Mm.
And you want to make them, you are on the same team, but
Mm.
you want to let them know, like, I want you to get promoted too. I want you to get a raise. Yeah. So how can we make you look good and
Mm.
do good research, do real research,
Yeah.
valid research, do the right thing for the user while also understanding the business goals, which probably are closely aligned to the product
Mm.
managers,
Yeah.
OKRs. Um,
Mm.
so yeah, I think there's a lot of value in just building those relationships. It's hard in a remote world
Mm.
to and like meeting, like when you have so many meetings on your calendar, to try to get someone to say like, hey, let's just have a half hour to do socializing, like chit
Yeah.
chat, and like people will be so busy that they are like, I don't have time for this, and they're like really annoyed with
Mm.
your wish to get to know them. But finding the common ground with them
Yes.
is a lot of times what takes something from like just immediate sort of animosity and like butting
Mm.
heads constantly to,
Yeah.
all right, I know she's on my side. I know we're on the same team. I
Mm.
trust her that we're going in the right direction.
Yeah.
Or that I trust her that she you know,
Mm.
that we're on the same team. Yeah, we're on the
Yeah.
same team.
Absolutely. And I think in those conversations as well, like that are not about work. You get to know the person, you get to know, and they'll feel probably more comfortable to ask you questions about what you do or about research, or even if they heard something that you brought up in a presentation or something, they might feel comfortable to bring that up in those, let's say, social moments. Oh, yeah, just going back to work, I noticed you brought that up in a recent meeting. I had a few questions, and because you're in a relaxed setting, and that's something that I noticed, because I'm a big like fan of what you just said around like aligning everybody before you go away and do the research. So even if that's in a one-on-one or in a meeting with the various stakeholders, making sure that they know, kind of setting expectations and that they have their input, because then they're invested then and they know, okay, they're going to go away and do that. And then when you do present, they already kind of know what you've been looking for rather than it all being super new.
Yes, the investment. They feel
Yes.
invested too, just like you said. The other thing I wanted to say too about stakeholders is try to get used to conflict and facing it. Like for me, if I
Mm.
know something's awkward with them or they're mad, I always will try to get a one-on-one with them to say, hey,
Yeah, yeah,
let's clear the air.
yeah.
And it's like I did some training in mediation and
Mm.
like community mediation, and that's they say, there's a book even, conflict is a hidden gift.
Ah, okay.
And I kind of embrace that too. You gotta, it's so good to feel like you can work through that. Even when it comes to your
Mm.
friends, your family, you're like, okay, I'm able to, actually face conflict face to
Yeah.
face.
I need to read this book because I hate
I'll send you a
conflict.
link. I'll
That
send you
sounds
a
good.
link.
I'll share it with the podcast as well. But yeah, that's also something nice to consider. Like, I hate conflict. It's just in my personality. If I know that, or if I perceive, like, it's also a gift and like a curse to have this perception. Like, and I can always kind of perceive in people's words. It does help me in my research. In
Mhm.
that sense, it's a gift. But for other things, like I just perceive when someone's strange or their tone of voice, and then that'll play on my mind, and it will really affect me. So I that's something that I've done as well. What you mentioned, and again, like I advise other people as well to do it to as soon as possible to meet with them, like you say, one on one, kind of clear the air. Or sometimes you'll notice that they didn't have a problem with you. It's just, I don't know, that day they
It's
were feeling a
it's
bit off. And
it's personal. Like they've got something going on with their family.
exactly.
Exactly. That's why it's good to clear it, because otherwise you'll be like, they're mad at me. And
Yeah.
but then if they open up to you about something in their personal.
Oh, I missed that last part. I don't know if it was my
Oh,
connection or...
I was just saying, if they open up to you about something in their personal lives, then there you go. You're building that trust.
Exactly, exactly. And then they'll also view you. It's actually been mentioned to me as well that they'll like say thanks for coming to kind of see if I was okay, or even just clear the air if you felt that, because if you just leave it and if there is a problem one day, then it can obviously grow into something bigger. But it also shows that you care about the team dynamic, the team environment, and that's important.
Mhm.
And also as you build up this network, or not network, but you build up this rapport amongst your team and amongst the rest of the wider organization. When you do these presentations, you won't feel it won't feel as daunting. I don't know if you've experienced this. It won't feel as daunting because you know everyone a bit more intimately. So if there are any questions, you won't view it as like a clash, but you view it as someone who is just wanting to do the best for the team, for you, for what you're doing, and also for the rest of the team.
Like you
Mm.
said, there's friendly faces in the audience there. You
Yeah.
mentioned, I don't know what people call this exactly. I call them political maps, but when you
Mm.
look that up, you'll get stuff about politics. But what I mean is like who's a supporter or a
Ah,
skeptic
yeah.
of
Yeah.
research. And yeah, you'll have, like I said, more friendly faces in the audience, and
Mm.
it'll almost feel like I feel like I've gotten a question from someone in a readout where it felt like a plant. Like
Ah.
I didn't ask them to ask this question, but it's a great question that's actually seems like they're trying to help me,
Yeah.
make the research sound better or help me convince the other person in the room who really holds the
Mm.
power.
Yeah.
When you get your friends out there, yeah, things work better.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And I've experienced that the bad side of that when that's not being done. Like I was new and kind of new in the role. It was a couple of years ago. I was early on in the job as well. I was the only researcher as well, and it was the first research project. And I knew there was one or two in the audience that were more skeptical about research and had not really worked with researchers in the past.
Mhm.
And then they like like midway through my presentation, they like batted in with these like kind of scathing questions or remarks or around research and what I was doing, almost like what is the point in this? What is the benefit of this? And why didn't we just A/B test it? And when you're new, you're early on in your career, that can really shake your confidence. Also, even in your role as a researcher, you think, yeah, what what am I doing? So it's good. I'm glad I had that experience because now I know what to do. But yeah, like
Mhm.
building that rapport, and then eventually the main guy and all of that. In the end, I had some one-on-ones with him, and I got to know him better. And in the end, we ended up like really close friends. And he ended up
Mhm.
becoming an advocate for research.
Mhm.
His doubts was just around, look, how does this affect me and what I'm doing? Could we not have done this quicker, etc., etc.
Mhm.
Once you alleviate those worries and concerns, that's all they're concerned about, not you personally or what your work. They just want to do the best for their team, but also for what they're doing as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Yeah.
Cool.
Eventually you'll be like, when someone jumps into your readout, maybe you'll be this way, maybe you'll never enjoy it this much. But when someone jumps into my readout and wants to like throw curveballs, I'm kind of like, "Ooh, bring it
How do you
on.
like
Like
it?
what's up? Like what do you want to do here? Like what are you trying to do?" Like it's just a fun, any and it ends up being like any questions are good. The worst
Yeah.
kind of thing is like you do a readout and like
Silence. Yeah.
crickets and you're like, I would rather someone interrupt me and try to try to throw me under the bus.
And
Maybe that's
yeah,
my personality. I don't
yeah, I
know.
think probably your personality. I think as I mentioned before, like I hate conflict. Like I'm working
Yeah.
on it, but that if you are that sort of person, that can be like your worst nightmare, like in front of 40
Yeah.
people, and it's like and you're trying to like in your head you're almost like scrambling to try and save the presentation. But yeah, I think it's also natural when you're early on in your career as well. But I think the more experience you get, and as you say, like you start to almost enjoy it because you become more confident in yourself, confident in your work, what you're doing, and you know you can handle those curveballs and those more direct questions because you've got the experience behind you. You know the impact that this research can have. Um, but yeah, actually now, okay, there we go.
Okay.
Well, we can have a few bloopers in as well. It's not an issue.
Well,
uh,
actually, so speaking of being confident in your readouts,
mm,
like during your readout, and you saying, "Oh, like we'll keep talking. Like we want this to be a
yeah.
natural conversation, right?"
Mm,
So that that is something that takes the time to learn too in your career. And if you're not a comfortable public speaker, like who really is? Like
yeah,
I
no.
don't know who starts off that way. Um, but it's another sort of random element of my life is I teach yoga just for
Oh,
fun, like on the side here and there. But
mm,
that's one place where you're like, I have a room full of people
mm,
listening to me, looking for guidance. Um, I'm gonna say left foot when I meant right foot. I'm gonna call the wrong
nice.
pose. It's been good practice for me of like,
Yeah.
keep going, just keep going. And
Mm,
even I got this advice once from a salesperson because by the time I was leaving user testing, I was like almost like a technical salesperson, like consultant, where I would get
mm,
on with the salespeople with their sales calls, and then I would do proof of concept studies for the sales team to try to land big clients. I remember this one salesperson. He said there a train went past, and I
mm.
apologized to the client, and he gave me the feedback afterwards. He said, stuff like that, just keep going. Don't acknowledge it. Don't acknowledge it. Just keep going. And I still think
Mm,
about that moment of like, okay, yeah, like why do I need to draw attention to it? Just
yeah.
keep moving forward. So I think
Mm.
about that moment a lot. And yeah, like what teaching yoga has brought to me.
Yeah, that's nice. That's nice. Also bringing in other experiences or things that you do in your life that can help you in your job. That's something I always like to look at as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's cool. That's cool. Okay, I wanted to just bring it now towards the end of the recording. It's been super interesting hearing all this stuff.
Yeah.
But I wanted to get. I always like to end podcast episodes on a piece of advice that you would like to leave with our listeners and watchers, hopefully. Yeah. So can be anything from your career, something somebody told you that has just like kind of stayed with you. But what would you like to leave our listeners? for this episode.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. The So I think we've already talked a good bit about patience
Hmm.
as a and bringing it in bringing it in to the different, whether it's in the moment in a conversation with a participant or maybe even with your spouse. Like leave room for them to talk, leave room for
Yes.
them to talk. But I also say patience in terms of your career and the maturity at a company. When
Mm.
you're joining a company and you're expecting a beautiful, perfect UX process, you're going to be really disappointed at most
Yeah.
companies, you're going to be really disappointed.
Mm.
And it does take years sometimes to build those relationships, build that trust, show them the benefit.
Mm.
Um, and I see people sometimes come in and say, well, they're not doing it right. We're not doing it right. And it's kind of like just wait, and let's do a little bit. Let's do a little bit more discovery research. Let's bring in some generative questions and workflow
Mm.
questions into this usability test. Put it at the end, maybe.
Yeah.
Like just and having that patience. Like I saw in my 4 years at GE Healthcare, from just doing the bare minimum to satisfy the FDA to uh the product managers were asking us, well, where's the concept testing? Did you do the concept testing on this
Mm.
yet? And it was beautiful. It was beautiful to see that.
Mm.
So we've covered patience. The other thing I say, my favorite quote, I think it's Wayne Gretzky, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And
Mm.
this is another piece of advice from salespeople. A salesperson at a networking event gave me this advice. He said, ask for what you want. You should always just ask for what you want. The worst thing is you don't get it,
That's true,
right?
yeah.
So
I
that's a
like that.
little bit of advice. That's a quick one. It's just ask for what you want, you
Yeah,
know?
I like that one. I like that one. So I think as well, if you are early on in your career or you're looking for work and you haven't got that experience behind you, just go out and ask for experience, even ask for that job. Just because if
Ask
you don't ask, you're never gonna get it.
ask for that connection too.
That
Build your
connection.
network, ask for that connection. You just get ghosted on LinkedIn and that's fine.
Yeah, that's
At
okay.
least you tried.
Exactly. And you don't know them, so no
Yeah,
one's hurt.
yeah.
So yeah, no,
Thanks,
I like that.
Dale.
No problem, no problem. Thanks to you for coming on and kind of we let the conversation flow and lead us to communication, all of that. So I've really enjoyed hearing about your background, but also just your advice around yeah, just that you've drawn from your experience around stakeholder management and communication, presenting, overcoming these fears. So I really appreciate it, Mary.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dale. Thanks for the opportunity.
No problem at all, no problem.